So what's up guys, and if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I got a couple of new toys lately. The Samyang 14mm T3.1 and the Samyang 24mm T1.5 lenses. Both are primes, both are Cine lenses, and both are super sharp. Now these lenses often also fall under the name of Rokinon or Bauer, but they're essentially one and the same, just with different branding. But the key point about these lenses is that they come at a fraction of the price of most other prime lenses of a similar quality. So I'm going to be doing a separate video altogether looking in depth at the 24mm T1.5 Cine lens. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert right now, it's an absolute cracker of a lens. So make sure you subscribe to see that when it gets finished. But today we're going to focus our attention on the 14mm T3.1 Cine lens. So let's get into it. So first up, I want to flag that whilst I will touch slightly on photography, my primary use of these lenses is with video work. And so accordingly, the majority of this review will be looking at this lens from a videographer's perspective. So as opposed to zoom lenses, which definitely have their place, particularly in regards to their convenience and versatility, a prime lens has a fixed focal length, meaning you can't zoom in or out, but what you get in return for that is a sharper image and more often than not a wider maximum aperture, which basically means you can allow more light into the lens, meaning that they're better for both low light conditions as well as providing a shallower depth of field, or in other words, when your subject is in focus and the background is blurry as hell, giving you that really cinematic look. Now you may have noticed the Cine part of the lens name, and you might be wondering what that means. In short, Cine lenses are designed primarily for video and cinematography work with a few key different features from standard photography lenses. Number one is the declicked aperture. So with standard lenses, your aperture ring clicks into place when you change the f-stop, whereas with a declicked aperture ring, it gives you the ability to slide your aperture ring gradually, giving you seamless adjustments in how much light you're letting into the lens. Where this will probably most come in handy is if you're shooting a continuous shot in differing lighting situations, so for example moving from indoors to outdoors. Rather than a jittery change of aperture which will make your footage look incredibly amateur, you can have a silky smooth adjustment making the change appear seamless. Check this out. Along with that, instead of f-stops, the aperture on Cine lenses are measured in t-stops. Without getting too in depth, t-stops is essentially a more accurate way of measuring the amount of light hitting the lens, which makes it ideal for professional settings where matching the aperture between a lot of different lenses is necessary to match the look of a film. On top of that, if a lens has an f-stop of 2.8, then that usually translates to a t-stop of 3.1. And so the 14mm Samyang that I have is essentially an f2.8 lens. As well as that, another difference you'll find on a Cine lens is the larger teeth on both the aperture and focus rings, meaning they've been designed to be used with most follow focus systems. And finally, on a Cine lens, you'll notice that there is a much greater range on the focus ring, basically allowing for both pin-sharp accuracy and also super smooth focus pulls. So moving on to the build and the design of these lenses, and I've got to say, I was immediately impressed. Now before I go on, it's probably worthwhile telling you that I have no affiliation with Samyang whatsoever, and I bought this lens out of my own pocket, and so you can be sure that everything in this review is my own honest opinion. As well as that, I'm shooting this review on my Canon T3.1, which is a crop censored camera, and whilst this lens is compatible with full frame cameras, just know that all the test footage and test photos will be shot using a crop censored camera. Anyway, the lens itself has a lot of weight to it, even a bit more than the 24mm, which is actually bigger in size. And so as a result, it definitely feels very premium. The weight of it might actually put off some users, and it's definitely a bit of a shock coming from my 50mm plastic Canon lens and the 18-55 Canon kit lens, which are both cheap and very lightweight. But in all honesty, I really enjoy the weight of the lens on my camera, and like I said, it just makes things feel much more premium. The lens itself seems to be primarily made out of metal, and the lens hood is made out of plastic, and so the lens does not feel flimsy at all, in fact quite robust. You might have noticed that it comes with a large plastic lens cover, and that is because of the size of the lens itself. Now, as well as a large lens cover, because of the massive rounded glass that makes up the front panel of the lens, you can't actually use standard filters. You can buy this custom-made filter holder, but it's this clunky, big, square-shaped thing, and it's not super cheap either. So just be aware of that if you are someone who relies heavily on shooting with filters. As well as that, this lens is a completely manual lens, meaning that there is no autofocus and there is no communication between the camera and the lens. So you have to manually change the aperture on the lens itself. It also does not come with image stabilization, which means you may need to shoot with some sort of stabilizer or apply an effect in post-production if you're doing a lot of handheld work. Now for the photographers out there, if you are interested in this lens, then I'd probably steer you in getting the f2.8 non-Cine version instead, because then you have your clicked aperture as well as a shorter focusing distance on that focus ring. Now, if you've been watching this video and you're completely put off by the fact that this is an all manual lens, the one thing I'll say about that is just remember this is a super wide angle lens. So focusing is not as much of an issue as it would be if you were using a longer focal length lens. But in saying that, it is an exceptionally long focus ring. So if you are having to focus in and out on the fly, then this might not be the best fit. All right, so let's chat about image quality. And just a reminder, this is on a crop censored camera. For a lens of this price, you're looking at incredible quality. If we take a look at some footage taken wide open at T3.1 or f2.8, if we zoom right in, we can see that the center of the image is super sharp. And then moving out to the edges, we can see that even they are crazy sharp too. Now let's grab the same shot, but stop down to the equivalent of f4, and the image becomes even sharper at the edges. And this level of sharpness here pretty much stays constant from here down to f22. There is a slight barrel distortion, which is even greater if you're shooting on a full frame camera, but you may either like that effect or can fix it in After Effects quite easily using the optics composition effect to straighten out the shot. The minimum focus distance is 11.02 inches or around 28 centimeters, so it's certainly not going to get you super close to your subject, which is a little bit of a bummer, and certainly won't get you macro-like focal length, so keep that in mind. So now to the point that I'm sure most of you want to see, and that is some test footage. So let's crank the music up, sit back, and enjoy some 14mm goodness. So let's recap. What we have here is a super affordable lens. We're talking around $300 US depending on where you buy it from, that has optics that absolutely challenge those of a much higher priced lens. Sure, you have the slight drawback of it being a fully manual lens depending on how you look at it, but for videography, that's not an issue at all. In fact, I'd argue that fully manual is way better than automatic anyway for video purposes. Depending on how you look at it, the super long focus throw may be a bit of an issue, especially if you're looking to do on-the-fly focus adjustments, and having no image stabilization can be a bit of an issue with handheld shots. But the build is solid and robust. The focus and aperture rings are super smooth, and above all that, the image quality is crispy as hell. As a videographer, you will not be disappointed with this lens, particularly if you are looking for a wide angle lens. And what I love about it is the fact that it can be interchangeable between crop censored and full frame cameras. So if you upgrade to a full frame in the future, you're covered. As a photographer, would I recommend this lens? Well, it depends what you're going to be using it for. So if you're doing things like landscape or Milky Way photography, then absolutely. In many respects, landscape photography is quite similar to video work in that you have time to set up your shot, set your focus, set your framing, and so a long focus throw would not be an issue at all. On the other hand, if you're doing things like wedding photography or something similar where you're going to be on the fly, taking quick pictures, having to focus in and out, then I would not steer you in the direction of this lens, but only for the reasons that I've already laid out. It might make a great companion piece to your kit though, so keep that in mind. But anyway, that's about it for this review. If you have any questions regarding this lens, feel free to put them in the comments below. But aside from that, I'll catch you guys later.